I've spent a decade taking a bite out of conspiracy theories, unraveling urban legends, and grappling with worldwide top secret issues.
I've even racked up some of their awards.
All while ferreting out the bottom line.
On all topics, controversial, bizarre, and taboo. Interviewing movers and shakers, agitators and muckrakers.
But that doesn't answer my question. That is all I'm answering.
With me, Cary Harrison, as your guide.
Harrison with you. This is Harrison on the Edge, part of our public broadcasting. You can find us live broadcasting on FM stations up and down west coast of Florida. You can find us online streaming as well, everywhere. Keyword Go Harrison. I want to introduce to you one of my new favorite people, a hero. We have had Susan Sarandon here, all kinds of wonderful women who have a large footprint in the entertainment industry, but we don't see enough female directors yet. We have to go sometimes to Sweden to find really good ones. This is not to say there aren't great ones here. Great, like Donald Trump, everything is great. It's outstanding. But you really are, because what you're doing is you're telling a story, and this is the way I'm introducing her right now. You're telling a story that is analogous to what we're seeing with Native Americans right now. Yours takes place in the 1930s, but as we were just saying off the air, we're now reliving the 1930s here in the United States, even in Europe, and it's about what are known as the Sami. Derogatorily, we might think of them as Laplanders near Sweden, but it is a whole group of people, somewhat invisible, even in Sweden, it seems.
Yes, it's the Samis are the indigenous people of Europe, and in the Nordic countries. We live in 4 countries. I'm Sami too, and traditionally living a nomadic lifestyle with the reindeer herding, but not all of us. I mean, there's just 10% doing that.
In Sweden, just recently, you have a show that runs sort of 24 hours real time. You'll just lock a camera down and just shoot nature real time, day after day, like, look, a cricket. And one of them was reindeer just walking around, just reindeer for 15, 17 hours, and we got to actually see the Sami in there.
Yes.
In many ways. So that was a new introduction. That was here in the States because they covered this strange channel. So for many, it was the first time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, most people in the Nordic countries don't know that much about Sami people. In school we just learned that it's indigenous people in 4 countries, but in many ways it's very similar to Native Americans and our histories too, like our colonial history and our we had residential schools. We have another way of singing. It's called yoik. It's almost like throat singing.
Like yodeling in a way.
It's not yodeling, but it's often confused.
Yes,
with,
that's right.
Yes.
And we're going to talk about your film in just a moment. I want to introduce to you again Amanda, and I'm going to say her last name appropriately. It's actually Chanel, right?
Yes.
Which you may change to Colonel, because I believe when you were making the film, they called you Colonel, because it's a great film and it's highly disciplined, and you tell a powerful, gripping story, use a first-time actress in it, and we actually get to see this invisible population. Again, an analogy to what we're seeing in the United States. We have Native Americans to the tune of 120 million scattered across, nameless. We don't know who they are, where they are, but they're actually there. They're just not counted. Yeah. And it's weird. It's all over the world. As soon as you're nomadic, you vanish. But you're actually everywhere, and the rest of us who are not nomadic are in one spot, but there's more of you.
I think we're everywhere.
Yeah, right?
I think that's encouraging, but it's also, I mean, the film is about someone who leaves her past behind and cut all ties to her family and culture. And a lot of people have done that, I believe, in all indigenous communities. So that's where it started for me, because I have elders in my family who strongly reject Sami people, speaks quite badly about them, but they are Sami themselves, and I've always known that. But after going to our residential schools, they're now Swedish, and we can talk about their past.
In your film, Amanda, we look at what it was like in the 1930s. We all know historically with the Nazis. The calipers measuring the brain, we see that in your film. We see not the brain, but the skull.
Yeah.
And kind of these Nordic standards that people have to qualify for. And that was very normal there. We're now seeing sort of the same trend here. I think your film in many ways is going to speak to all of us, which is probably your intended goal.
Yes.
But when you were shooting it, we didn't have 2017 right now yet.
No, when I started interviewing elders in my family and others years ago, Europe didn't look like it does today, and the US. And now I think it makes more and more sense to make a film about assimilation and what is full assimilation.
Yeah.
What is it that we ask for people to leave behind, to fit in?
Yeah.
And, you know, we call it integration, but I think what we're asking out of people is really assimilation. And I think it's important to see it from the other side. And then, of course, it's the whole mindset I think we're still carrying with us that comes from phrenology and racial biology and the thoughts that were science back then in the 1930s with superior races and inferior races. I think we have internalized a lot of things. I think I speak as a Sami person as well as a Swedish person. You know, how we see ourselves, how we think about other people. I think it's important to look at the past.
It's critical.
Since we're carrying, like, we have a mindset that comes from there.
And we love to repeat it. At least right now, we seem to be looking that way. I was just in Australia, and I talked to a lot of Aboriginal people there, and they were also forced by law to assimilate. I mean, they were kidnapped, as you know, in the 1970s and 80s, and horrific things happened that we don't know about in the United States. In fact, a lot of Australians simply don't really know. You've got this Northern Territory that's its own place, and you got to get on an airplane or drive 10 hours to get up there. And in many ways, the assimilation, which is the plot of the play, is to dilute somebody's culture. Not to bring you in because we want you. It's to kind of make you go away by making you disappear. That includes gay people, my people. I'm just going to out myself right here, right now, while we're having this conversation. Assimilation is part of the goal to make you go away. And then you're not on the edge doing things that cannot be controlled or commodified for money.
Yes, but at the time in the 1930s in Sweden, it was also believed that, that Samis were on the lower level of evolution.
Right.
So therefore, they should speak Swedish and be Christians, but they couldn't take part in the Swedish educational system. So you could not become a doctor, let's say, or you were supposed to stay there, but be under control.
Right. So how is it that in many ways, and I speak on behalf of all white people, all of them, right now, how is it that the highest goal that we can achieve is to replicate and mimic the culture of the Sami in our spirituality, in our god, goddess, in our earth, and all of this stuff, if you know what I'm talking about, especially here in Los Angeles. We have this pining to imitate Native American worship and pull away from our own Christian thing. We feel that we're evolved actually doing what you do more naturally. There's so many ironies in this. The same thing, white people love to get a tan, but people who naturally have a tan are not welcome in that country club.
Yes.
So it's an odd collision. I think in many ways your film talks about these ironies and these impossible juxtapositions that go on in life.
Yes, I think it does.
Right.
And I find it interesting, though, that because most people don't know what Sami people look like. You can actually burn your traditional dress and disappear, sort of, or blend in.
Yeah.
But can you really? Like, how much? I think most people end up in what is called third space. You know, you don't belong to the old group. You don't, and you can't fit into the new because there are all these codes that you brought up with, or how you use your body or your language, and it's so hard to be a part of another group than you were born into. Like, that's a fight, and that's what she's trying to in the film, to leave her old life behind and fit into the new world.
And just to be clear, this was your grandmother.
It's
Ish.
inspired by her,
Ish, yeah.
but I can't really talk that much about it because it's really an open wound. So, I mean, it's the film is a declaration of love to this older generation, like those who left everything behind and cut all ties, and those who stayed. So it's a whole generation where many people left, and many of them never told their children where they're from. So I guess a lot of my friends my age wouldn't really know maybe where your grandparents are from.
In that we have a digital stream here, which means it's likely going to be a younger audience watching who are going to relate to your age group and how you look at the world. What is your assessment, and I've asked this of Native Americans, why do you think the white man or the whatever have been acting like this? What is it about you so threatening that this goes on? I don't understand what the hell it is. Do you have any insight into that?
It's a good question, but I think it's interesting how this politics based on racial biology happened at the same time as there was an interest in getting this land. So at the same time, you said
real estate.
They're underdeveloped. They need a guardian by the state, and we will decide for them because they will stay in like a childlike state all their life. That was what was thought at the time, right? And the head of the State Institute of Race Biology, that was what he said. But at the same time, in Sweden, there was a great interest in the minerals and the land up north. There's gold, there's minerals, there's oil on the Norwegian side, and so on. So I mean, it's funny though how that happens at the same time. So I don't think it just has to do with.
It never does. It never does. During
Race.
George Bush, the recent George Bush, you probably remember him, swinging Dick Cheney, all these great characters. The Native Americans, or the Alaskans, that is, the Eskimos, as they're still called, are the only ones allowed to extract minerals up there because it's on their land.
Yeah.
So what Dick Cheney did, as you know, with his energy policy, is he got his company Halliburton to hire one of these Eskimos, and then through the Eskimo was able to extract the mineral rights. We see simultaneously, and I just returned from Cuba, a huge discovery of nickel and copper in Cuba. Oh my God. Nickel and magnesium. Oh my God, like an endless, unlimited supply. So the Russians now are very interested in this through Donald Trump, who's now saying nice things about Cuba. So these horrible communists, unforgivable, are now, they're actually okay. They're our kind of communists. So it's very interesting why we treat people the way we do, because they have something that we want, or they don't have something, or the inverse, whatever that might be.
Yeah,
Right?
whatever that.
I mean, it's weird. It's weird. It's a paradox of some sort.
But of course, it's also, I mean, the fear of the other, and
like xenophobia, as we call it.
yes, and that's where that comes from. I mean, I'm just a filmmaker.
Yeah, but you're a storyteller.
Yes.
And if we think about a caveman sitting in the cave, he sees a shadow go by, and it must be instinctive to do something about the shadow: fight, flight, freeze. The three ways that we react to everything. And it's funny, like children are generally pretty open to everything until they learn that's the enemy. So I think much of this is taught nowadays. And when you tell a story such as you do, we unlearn these crazy thoughts that we have.
And I think that's what film can do too. I mean, it's an empathy-making medium.
Yeah.
It's as close as we get to be another person and in another person's shoes or head or dreams, depending on how you see it. And I think that's, I mean, you have to be aware of that power making films, I think. It's I'm so happy to be able to do that, to show this world seen from the inside, and either you recognize yourself. I think a lot of people do that, it seems, around the world who've seen this film. And I mean, of course, we all recognize like trying to fit in and changing yourself to fit in, and who to be loved, just from being young, you know.
Right.
And how much should you sacrifice or change yourself to be a part of a group? But then, to many people, this world is new. So I think art can make it can change something. That you get to be on this other side.
Yeah.
Those who were always seen as the other, you feel like you're one of them because you've been with one of them for 2 hours.
You sound like me now. It makes sense. But it's so many layers. Now, I think we have a trailer for your film. Am I right, Marvin? Well, we'll just make sure that goes in there later for sure. Harrison with you. If you're just hearing the audio side of this, we're talking right now to Amanda Chanel. Sami Blood is her film. It's a gripping story based on Amanda's own grandmother's life of a young Sami girl struggling with racism and oppression and her own cultural identity in 1930s Sweden. And we see this famous kind of timeline that we all studied in history of how the Germans ran things, the Swedes not so distant, the Norwegians in Kristiansand, or however that's pronounced, had the Gestapo headquarters there. So all of this thinking spread out throughout. And help us understand what a Sami is. We know the term Laplander. We know that's not we know that's a pejorative term. It's not the right one. But most Americans could use a little help in finding Canada sometimes on a map, and Mexico. It's just kind of how we are. Help us understand, so we know what Swedes are, we know what Norwegians are, and then there's this group we haven't heard about before. What are Samis?
Samis are the indigenous people living in Europe. And
all over Europe?
No, only in the north, like in Sweden, Norway, Finland, and Russia.
Yeah.
And I'm Sami too, and we're one people, but we speak 9 different languages.
9?
Yes.
Novolingual.
Yes.
That's hot.
And traditionally, we're a nomadic people, working with reindeer herding or tending reindeer. But Samis have also traditionally been, fishing, hunting, doing other things. Now it's only connected to reindeer herding for most people, but that's not the entire truth. And we have like our own parliaments, and and there's a lot of similarities to indigenous people in other countries, or First Nations, or Aborigines, in many ways. I think the way you relate to nature, our way of singing is called yoik. Mindset and religion and so on. So the language has nothing to do with Swedish or Norwegian or the other Nordic languages. And no one really knows how many we are, because I think we're kind of everywhere, because we have this history with residential schools.
Yeah.
And they went on until the 1960s, and in those schools, Sami language was not allowed, and after that, a lot of people left the Sami community and didn't teach their children Sami language, and many of them cut all ties to their past and didn't tell their children where they were from or that they're Sami. So
the culture, the Swedish culture, we're just looking at Sweden specifically here right now, the Swedish culture created shame around that history.
Yes, I mean, Samis were seen as an inferior race on a lower level of evolution.
You speak 9 languages.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
No, I mean, there's only a few people who can speak many of them. I can speak one, poorly.
You speak English fluently.
Oh, thank you.
Like warm water flowing through an ice pipe.
Yeah.
It's beautiful.
It's better than my Sami.
No, I mean your English is, you have the same amount of vocabulary words in your vocabulary quiver as the average American who speaks it natively since birth. That's hugely
wow,
impressive.
that's a compliment.
It's a data fact. It's not even a compliment. This is big. You also speak, what else do you speak?
French and Spanish and Danish.
French, Spanish, Danish.
Yeah, well.
Swedish.
Swedish, yeah. But I went to the Danish film school because I was inspired, I guess, but like the dogma tradition, and I think they're really good storytellers. I mean, that's what the dogma wave did.
Yeah.
That you only had characters and story, and nothing else to lean back on or hide behind. And now we don't, or the Danes don't make dogma anymore. But I still think they're great storytellers.
Let me ask you, just kind of, since we're talking about Europe now and America now, and your film is about the 1930s, and we're actually seeing today, my opinion, not just my opinion, other people seem to opine the same way, but we're seeing a replay of this kind of thinking again. Here in the States, we have Muslim bans. We target Mexicans, everybody, really. And it's like normal and okay. Like Europe in 1930, it's normal and okay. But it's not okay. And what happens is when it is allowed to play out, people get hurt. And I'm wondering if, not that anybody can predict the future, but how do you guys in Europe look at what we're doing here? We don't know how to look at it here because Donald Trump sends a tweet and we yell about the tweet. But I think you look at it, you pull your camera back, what are you seeing going on here?
Well, I think what we see in Europe is quite similar.
Yeah.
Of course, I can't speak for everyone though. But
I did that
of course,
earlier.
it scares me with the development in the U.S. But I mean, we have also a more and more. It seems like we're going back to the 1930s in many ways, and not all people have the same rights. We have a lot of people in refugee camps or closing borders. We talk a lot about assimilation and that people should assimilate, and that's what interests me. One of the issues that I was interested in making the film is like, what is full assimilation? Like, what is that really? What are we asking?
Loss of identity.
People?
Isn't that what that is?
What do we ask out of people to do? Like to leave behind? And even if you leave everything behind and cut all the ties to your culture and your language and your background, will you ever fit in? Like, will you be allowed to fit in on the same, like everyone else? I'm not sure.
Well, I know. I
But
mean, it part of what makes life interesting is that you have your personal edge, I have my personal edge. Like, together we could be interesting. But if we're the same person, it's pretty damn boring. Plus, you don't have any invention, no innovation, no clever jokes. It's like we're all just so politically corrected in a way, where we're flattened out. It's an Orwellian nightmare. So,
What do you mean by assimilation? That we should all fit in?
No, I think assimilation, like legal assimilation is fine, where you and I have the same rights. But you still remain an individual. Your history, your outlook, your worldview, your Weltanschauung, German word, all of that cool stuff, you get to hold on to that. But if you have to sacrifice that to fit in a box so that I can then label you and sell you and move you around and give you a job and all of that, I don't think that's right, because then who you are disappears.
Yes, and it's been traveling around the world with the film now, and it's been interesting how many people have come up to me and said, this film is really about me.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's about a girl in the 1930s who leave everything behind and leave her boarding school. But one of them said, he came up to me and said, I've told everyone I'm from Hong Kong, and I have this British name, but actually I'm from China, and I have another name, and I can't speak Cantonese, and I just hope no one will discover that. Because if I tell them I'm from China, they will look at me in another way. And he asked me, like, he says he was so lonely because when people like him, do they really like him?
Right.
Because it's not the entire truth. Yeah, and I met a lot of these people with these stories. Like, there are so many people that try to fit in, and so many secrets and lies.
To your point, we have here in Los Angeles, we have a very large Iranian community. But they call themselves Persians. Now, Persia kind of disappeared, 2,000 something years ago. But they call themselves that because if they say Iranian, we all immediately think of the Ayatollah. And it's finished, the conversation. Persian, we had a show in the 1960s here in the United States called I Dream of Jeannie. Probably never heard of it.
No.
And it was a blonde woman, Snow White blonde woman, who was from Iraq. Didn't exactly maybe fit the stereotypical Iraqi model, but she had a belly button and she was a genie out of a bottle. Very sexual, very hot, and it was a comedy. And so she was from Baghdad, and so it was Persia. And so the fantasy of that, we see blonde women. So if you take something that scares you, Jesus Christ doesn't scare people necessarily, but look at Jesus in the United States. He's a Nordic god, Sven.
Yeah.
Right? Now you look at Jesus in Spain, he's dark-haired, maybe green eyes.
Yeah.
But he's much darker. And then you look at Jesus in the African-American community here in the United States, and he's the person you're willing to get on your knees for. So in America, if you say Jesus Christ is King of the Jews and you make him look really Jewish, Americans are not going to get on their knees to that. So they have to make him look like a Swede.
Yeah.
Because we like Swedes. So this is that interesting layering. And again, getting back to your film, you delve into this stuff and you wake us up to the meaning of interpretation, of why these rules are there. You don't hammer on it, but you show us, you demonstrate through the rules that the grandmother character had to go through, the hoops that she had to jump through. We get to see how the thinking was, and we see it's bullshit.
Yeah.
We really do.
But now it's internalized in us.
Right. So you self-edit, which is the ultimate control, isn't it?
Yes.
Right.
It's interesting though. I after showing the film for a great Sami audience, one of the older men came up to me who's been to residential schools, and he said, "What do you think it has done to us that we were away from our parents for such a long time, and the only person to look up to was our teacher, or our teachers, and they were Swedish. They were the only adults around, so they were the ones punishing us, taking care of us, you know." They were everything. So of course we wanted to be like them. And what does that do to us now as adults? Like turning to like the authority. Like our idea of someone to look up to is someone not like us.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of things to investigate further in that, like this mindset that we're carrying with us that we're not really aware of. How we see ourselves, like if you start seeing yourself as inferior, because I've really been thinking about this older generation, how growing up in a time when they were seen as an inferior race and they could read about themselves in books. I mean, in Swedish schools for a long time, you would read a book called Swedish Racial Science, like in regular schools, and the texts about Sami people were very negative. And that was science. How do you not internalize that? And like, how do you keep your dignity in this? How do you fight this? Like, how do you fight this system?
Institutionalized thinking. I'm going to make an analogy because I 800% agree with you. Here in the United States, and I make American analogies because our audience is American, so that they can kind of relate to it. We have a DUI, driving under intoxication, which is if you're drinking and driving. You can also get what we call a DWB, driving while black. So if you're African American driving through Beverly Hills next door, you can get pulled over because what are you doing here?
Yeah.
But the police say, "May I help you?" Or better, "Are you lost?"
Okay.
Are you lost? This is the code that they do. Now, if you're a black guy in America and you grow up where a white woman and her daughter are on the sidewalk, you're walking this way, they're walking this way, and she grabs the daughter and holds her purse when they walk by, that's normal here. So imagine if that's the way it has always been for you. What is your self-image? That you're an honest guy, that you're attractive, that you're this, that you're that, or that there's something kind of wrong?
Yeah.
right? And maybe you don't even have words for it, but there's something wrong.
Yeah, I know. It's like the way people look at you, I think, does a lot too. And I'm not even sure if I can put it into words, but I guess that's why I make films. Because
Yes.
in a film, you can feel what it is
Right.
being looked at in a certain way. But I don't know how to put that into words.
Well, you did in your film. I'm so glad you came on. We've done a long segment only because I love talking to you.
Yeah.
I love this subject matter. It's really deep. You can't actually put it into words. You can try. I
No,
think
you
we
were good
tried.
at doing that.
Well, I'm doing my best.
Yeah.
You're really the expert. I mean, I'm fascinated by it. I went back. My family came over in 1645 from England, the other side of the Mayflower, and we were naughty in the state of Maryland. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And I went back to people with my last name, black people, and apologized to them. Because my family's never done that officially. In fact, my government has barely done that officially.
Yeah.
Really. And so I just wanted to, I did an experiment, a radio experiment.
Okay.
And I found this guy with my same last name. We were the same age. And he was a black guy. I was a white guy. He was from Baltimore, which is the same area where my family originally was. We went into a Brooks Brothers. You know what Brooks Brothers is?
No.
It's a men's clothing store. It's kind of high end.
Okay.
You know, they're famous for their gray suits, very conservative.
Okay.
And so we both went to buy a necktie, a silk necktie. We walked in together up to the necktie thing. Two people came up, one to him, one to me. The salesman came up to me and said, "May I help you?" The security guy went up to him and said, "May I help you?"
Okay.
Right? Like, we get it. We totally get it. And so I have that on tape. And I was a witness of his life, of what that looks like. Because I can hear these stories, but unless you I'm experiential.
Yeah.
Like, put me in the middle of it and let me feel it, and then it's real. And then I love to fight for it because I get it. So
And that's what's amazing with films, I think.
Right,
That you
right.
get to actually be someone else for a while
Yeah.
and be, take part in a world that you maybe couldn't take part in, be a part of in your real life because
Yeah.
of who you are, because you will never go there. Maybe because it's historical. But, I mean, it's an empathy machine.
Yeah, it really is. Well, give us how do we follow you? Follow you on Instagram, follow you on Twitter. How do we follow you?
Oh, wow. That's a good question.
Do you want to be followed?
You can follow like the hashtag Sami Blood.
Good. Okay.
I think
So
that maybe that's the
hashtag
way.
you'll see the graphics there. SAMI, if you're listening on radio, SAMIBLOOD, Sami Blood, hashtag Sami Blood. And we've been talking to Amanda, and I'm going to say it correctly again, Chanel.
Yes.
That's fine. And you may repronounce it someday for the benefit of all of us here, wherever here is. Thank you for making this film. Thank you for telling this important story and bringing to us a whole group of people that many of us didn't know were there. And that's been the problem all along. We didn't know they were there. Now we do. And it never goes away. You've opened a new door for us. And I thank you for coming on.
I hope so. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Harrison with you. We will see you next time.
Jaha flickor, här är nya klasskamrat.
Jag måste prata svenska.
18,0.
Ta av kläderna nu.
Eller Maja, föregå med ett gott exempel nu.
Ymmärrä set. Kiesä tuu bussita kiitos.
Ihmiset taas norrot. Ihmiset arenan bara cirkusjuhl. Jag vill studera vidare i Uppsala.
Ja, men ni kan inte samma sak som de svenska barnen. Ni måste vara här uppe för annars så dör ni ut.
Men om jag inte vill vara här? Ta tillbaka det du sa!
Har jag sagt?
Ta tillbaka det du sa! Du är lika mycket lapp som jag! Inte Sami on kena juman kolka. Han tahti Sami tätä päälle jirme. Ikisi tytni mielestä. Är det inte du som är från Lappland? som Niklas träffade. Men då kan ju du jojka, joddla, jojka.